A judge sentences two innocent black twin girls to life in prison, completely unaware they're undercover FBI agents. He thinks he's silencing two children. But what he's really done is trigger the very operation designed to destroy him. Inside the prison, these twins uncover a dark network, where young girls of color are bought, sold, and forgotten. Every move they make is calculated, every coded message bringing them closer to the truth. But when the judge learns who they really are, it's already too late. How far will they go to bring down the man who tried to bury them? And what secrets will explode when the system they're fighting turns on its own? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The morning sun filtered through gauzy curtains, casting a soft glow across the Carter twins' shared bedroom. The rapid click-clack of chess pieces against the board filled the quiet space, punctuated only by the steady ticking of their tournament timer. Amara's hand moved with precision, each piece placement deliberate and calculated. Across the board, Nia matched her sister's intensity, but with a different energy, more fluid, more instinctive. Their movements created a dance of black and white pieces across the checkered battlefield. 3 minutes, Amara murmured, her eyes never leaving the board. She shifted her knight, threatening Nia's queen. Nia tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, a small smile playing at her lips. Plenty of time. Her fingers hovered over her bishop before making an unexpected move with a pawn instead. The aroma of French toast and coffee drifted up from downstairs, where their father was preparing breakfast. It was their morning ritual, chess at dawn, followed by their dad's cooking. The routine hadn't changed since they were 12, even after their mother passed away. Their bedroom walls told the story of their achievements. Gleaming medals from state and national chess tournaments hung in neat rows, academic certificates displayed with quiet pride. Among them, a photo stood out. The twins flanked by Agent Michael Rhodes at last year's chess championship. To anyone else, he looked like a family friend celebrating their victory. Only they knew the truth behind his presence. "Check," Amara announced, her voice carrying a hint of satisfaction. Nia's response was immediate, her king finding safety behind a wall of pawns. "Not today, sis." "Girls!" Their father's voice carried up the stairs. "Breakfast is ready." They paused the timer simultaneously, their movements mirror-like in their precision. Downstairs, James Carter stood at the stove, his English teacher's reading glasses perched on his nose as he plated the French toast. The kitchen, like everything in their home, was organized and peaceful, a space where literature quotes shared wall space with family photos. "Tournament next week?" he asked as they settled at the table, pouring maple syrup over their breakfast. "Just practice," Amara replied, exchanging a quick glance with Nia. Their father nodded, already lost in grading papers beside his coffee mug. The school day passed in a blur of normal teenage activities, AP classes, lunch period, chess club meetings. But beneath the routine, anticipation hummed through both sisters like an electric current. When the final bell rang, they didn't head home. The diner sat on the corner of Maple and 4th, its neon sign buzzing quietly in the afternoon sun. Agent Rhodes was already waiting in a corner booth, his government issue suit replaced by casual wear that helped him blend in with the after-school crowd. "Ladies," he greeted them, sliding 2 chocolate milkshakes across the table. His smile was warm, but his eyes were serious. "Final briefing time." Nia wrapped her hands around the cold glass while Amara pulled out her notebook, maintaining their cover as students working on a project. "Operation Eclipse is a go," Rhodes said quietly, his words nearly lost in the clatter of dishes from the kitchen. "Caldwell County's juvenile system has shown all the patterns we've been tracking. Unexplained transfers, missing records, girls vanishing from the system entirely. The arrest has to look real," Amara stated, her voice steady despite the weight of what they were discussing. Rhodes nodded. "The convenience store on Parker Street. Owner's been briefed. He'll play his part, but everything else has to come from you two. Make it convincing, but keep it simple." "And the judge?" Nia asked, her usually bright eyes darkening with concern. "Judge Martinez has a pattern of harsh sentences for minor offenses, especially with teenage girls. She'll do exactly what we need her to do. Send you both into the system." Rhodes paused, studying their faces. "Are you sure about this? Once you're in, we can't guarantee your safety." The twins shared a look, one of those silent conversations they'd perfected over years of wordless chess matches. Amara's jaw set with determination, while Nia's expression softened with resolve. "We're sure," they answered in unison. That night in their bedroom, Amara and Nia ran through the robbery script one final time. Their movements were choreographed down to the smallest detail: how to appear threatening without actually endangering anyone, the exact words to say, even how to resist arrest without injuring the responding officers. Rhodes arrived after their father had gone to bed, slipping through their window with 2 burner phones and a stack of papers covered in chess notation. "Remember," he whispered, "the safe codes are embedded in these game records. Standard King's Indian defense means you're clear to proceed. Sicilian defense means abort and make contact. Queen's Gambit means immediate extraction needed." "We've got it," Amara assured him, tucking the papers into a hidden compartment in her chess set. "Your father?" Nia asked softly. Rhodes' expression softened. "We'll watch out for him. He won't know anything until it's over." After Rhodes left, their father's footsteps creaked down the hall. He opened their door just enough to peek in, finding what he always found: his daughters apparently asleep in their beds. "Good night, my queens," he whispered, using his old chess nickname for them. When the door clicked shut, Amara and Nia reached across the space between their beds, finding each other's hands in the darkness. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. Tomorrow would change everything, but tonight they held on to this last moment of being simply sisters, safe in their childhood bedroom, surrounded by the achievements of a life that was about to become their best cover story. Their joined hands were steady, betraying none of the fear they felt. In the quiet darkness, only the soft ticking of their chess timer marked the passing of their final hours of normalcy. The fog hung low over the rural gas station, turning the early morning light into a ghostly haze. The small store's fluorescent lights created an artificial glow that cut through the mist, illuminating the empty parking lot. A single car sat near the entrance belonging to the clerk inside. Amara and Nia approached the store with measured steps, their backpacks slung over their shoulders. Through the store's windows, they could see the clerk, an undercover asset they knew only as Thompson, arranging items on a shelf. The bell chimed as they pushed open the door. Nia's hand trembled slightly as she reached into her backpack, but Amara's face remained composed. The plastic prop gun, weighted with a metal frame, felt cold against Nia's palm. They had practiced this moment countless times, but the reality of it made her throat tight. "Empty the register," Amara commanded, her voice steady but threatening. Thompson played his part perfectly, raising his hands and backing away from the counter with convincing fear in his eyes. "Please, don't hurt me," he stammered, fumbling with the register keys. "Take whatever you want." The scene unfolded exactly as planned, Thompson moving slowly, the twins maintaining their positions, the security cameras capturing everything. But then the door chime rang again. A deputy neither girl recognized stepped into the store, his hand already moving to his weapon. He wasn't part of the operation. His presence threw everything off script. "Drop it, now!" the deputy shouted, drawing his gun. Nia immediately released the prop weapon, letting it clatter to the floor. But before she could raise her hands, the deputy lunged forward, grabbing her arm and slamming her face first into the linoleum. Blood spurted from her split lip as her head hit the ground. "Stay down!" he yelled, driving his knee into her back as he cuffed her. Amara started to turn, but another officer, appearing from nowhere, tackled her from behind. Her chest hit the floor hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. She gasped, fighting the instinct to counter the attack with her training. Instead, she forced herself to act terrified, letting tears well up in her eyes as the officer roughly secured the handcuffs. "Please," she whimpered, playing the role of a scared teenager. "We didn't mean to." "Shut up," the second officer snapped, yanking her to her feet. The deputies marched them outside where a patrol car waited in the fog. More officers had arrived, all of them white, all of them wearing expressions of smug satisfaction as they processed the scene. "Look what we caught," one deputy called out, shoving Nia toward the car. "Couple of ghetto trash trying to play gangster." Another officer pulled out his phone, snapping pictures of the girls in handcuffs. "Smile for your mugshots, ladies," he taunted, laughing as he captured their bloodied and disheveled state. They were pushed into the back seat, the door slamming behind them. Through the partition, they could hear the deputies laughing, making crude jokes about urban youth and their inevitable future behind bars. Neither twin spoke as the car pulled away from the gas station. They didn't need to. Years of silent chess matches had taught them to communicate without words. Naya's split lip was still bleeding, but her eyes remained clear and focused. Amara's shoulder ached from the tackle, but she kept her breathing steady. The ride to the station passed in a blur of rural roads and morning fog. No one called their father. No one contacted Agent Rhodes. No one mentioned their right to legal representation. At the station, rough hands separated them into different interrogation rooms. Amara's room was cold, with flickering fluorescent lights that made the institutional green walls look sickly. A camera blinked in the corner, recording everything. Hours passed. Different officers came and went, asking the same questions in increasingly hostile tones. Amara gave them just enough. A story about desperate circumstances, about bad choices, about fear. She kept her answers vague but emotional, playing the role of a frightened girl in over her head. In another room, Nia faced similar treatment. Her lip had swollen, making it painful to speak, but she maintained their cover story. When asked about the gun, she cried, saying they'd found it and thought it would make the robbery easier. The tears were real, though not for the reasons the officers assumed. Fingerprinting came next. Black ink stained their fingers as their prints were rolled onto cards. The officers joked about starting their criminal records early. Neither twin reacted to the taunts, knowing their prints were already in the FBI database under different names. As night fell, a transport van arrived to take them to the County Juvenile Holding Center. The facility loomed dark against the evening sky, surrounded by chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Inside, they were processed again, stripped, searched, and given orange jumpsuits that hung loose on their frames. The cell they were assigned to was small, with metal bunks bolted to opposite walls. A narrow vent near the ceiling connected their cell to the empty one next door. The sound of doors clanging shut echoed through the corridors as night staff began their rounds. Amara sat on the lower bunk while Nia took the upper one. They waited until the footsteps faded before moving closer to the vent. "You okay?" Amara whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yeah," Nia breathed back. "Just sore. You?" "I'm fine." Amara paused, listening for approaching steps. They didn't call Rhodes. "I know." Nia's whisper carried a trace of worry. "The deputy wasn't supposed to be there." "Doesn't matter now, we're in." Through the vent, they could hear other girls in nearby cells, some crying, others talking quietly, a few shouting at the guards. The sounds of the juvenile center at night surrounded them, a symphony of lost and forgotten children. The twins fell silent as a guard passed their cell, flashlight beam sweeping across the bunks. They lay still, pretending to sleep, waiting for the light to move on. When darkness returned, they stayed quiet, processing the events of the day and preparing for whatever would come next. The fluorescent lights of the courthouse buzzed overhead as Amara and Nia shuffled down the marble hallway, their oversized orange jumpsuits hanging loose on their frames. The chains around their wrists and ankles clinked with each step, echoing off the polished floors. Two guards flanked them, their hands resting casually on their belts. "Your lawyer's waiting," one guard said, gesturing to a disheveled man slumped against the wall outside the courtroom. His tie hung crooked, and even from several feet away, the sharp smell of bourbon wafted through the air. The public defender straightened up as they approached, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I'm Mr. Patterson," he mumbled, barely meeting their eyes. "We've got about 10 minutes before the hearing." He flipped through their case file, the pages crumpled and stained with what looked like coffee rings. Nia opened her mouth to speak, but Patterson cut her off. "Just let me do the talking. Judge Whitmore doesn't like outbursts." He swayed slightly as he turned toward the courtroom doors. Inside, the room was packed with white faces, court staff, local lawyers, and what appeared to be regular spectators who came to watch the proceedings. No press badges were visible, no cameras present. The twins were led to the defense table, their chains secured to metal loops bolted to the floor. "All rise," the bailiff called out as Judge Harold Whitmore entered through a side door. His black robe seemed to absorb the harsh overhead lighting, making him appear larger than life as he took his seat at the bench. His face was a mask of stern authority, but his eyes held something darker as they fixed on the twins. "Case number 2023 JD1142, the clerk announced. State versus Amara and Nia Carter. Whitmore picked up their file, his lip curling slightly as he read. The disgust in his expression was subtle but unmistakable. "Proceed," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. The prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman in a crisp navy suit, rose from her chair. "Your Honor, these defendants represent a growing crisis in our community. Evidence suggests they are affiliated with the East Side Kings gang, operating under orders to expand their territory into our county." Amara's hands tightened into fists beneath the table. There was no evidence because there was no gang connection. It was a complete fabrication. But Patterson remained seated, silent, absently straightening his tie. "The clerk's statement clearly indicates premeditated violence," the prosecutor continued, though they had never threatened Thompson. "The victims feared for their lives. This wasn't just a robbery. It was an act of terrorism against our peaceful community." Whitmore nodded gravely, making notes on his pad. The prosecutor went on, painting a picture of hardened criminals that bore no resemblance to the 15-year-old girl sitting at the defense table. Not once did she mention the missing security footage that would have shown exactly what happened. "Your Honor," Amara said suddenly, unable to stay silent any longer. "May I?" "You will speak when spoken to," Whitmore snapped, his gavel cracking against the bench. "Another outburst and you'll be removed from my courtroom." Nia shifted in her seat, starting to stand. The guard's hand clamped down on her shoulder, forcing her back down. Patterson didn't even look up from his legal pad, where he appeared to be doodling rather than taking notes. "If the defense has nothing to add," Whitmore said, glancing dismissively at Patterson, who simply shook his head, "then I'm prepared to render judgment." The courtroom fell silent. Even the usual shuffling of papers and creaking of chairs ceased as Whitmore leaned forward, his face hardening into a mask of righteous indignation. "What I see before me today is proof that our society is failing," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Two young people, completely devoid of moral character, of basic human empathy. Soulless is the only word that comes to mind." Nia's breath caught in her throat. Beside her, Amara sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on Whitmore's face. She took in every detail, the way his jowls quivered as he spoke, the slight asymmetry of his features, the thin scar above his right eyebrow, the way his fingers gripped the edge of the bench. "Under Caldwell County's extended sentencing policy for juvenile offenders," Whitmore continued, "I have the authority to ensure that dangerous elements are removed from our community for as long as necessary. Therefore, I sentence both defendants to life in juvenile detention, with no possibility of early release." A murmur of approval rippled through the spectators. Patterson fumbled with his briefcase, seemingly eager to leave. The prosecutor smiled slightly, gathering her papers with practiced efficiency. "Get them out of my courtroom," Whitmore ordered, already turning away. The guards stepped forward, checking the chains before leading the twins toward the side door. As they passed the bench, Amara's eyes locked onto Whitmore one final time, committing every aspect of his appearance to memory. The expensive watch barely visible beneath his robe, the gold ring on his right hand, the slight tremor in his left fingers as he signed their commitment papers. In the hallway, Nia began to hum softly, a gentle melody their mother used to sing when they were small, before the cancer took her. The sound floated through the sterile corridor, drawing sharp looks from the guards but continuing unbroken as they were led outside. Rain had started to fall, creating dark spots on the courthouse steps. A white transport van waited in the loading area, its engine idling. The back doors stood open, revealing metal benches and mesh-covered windows. The guards helped them climb in, checking their restraints one final time before slamming the doors shut. Through the mesh, they could see the courthouse growing smaller as the van pulled away, heading toward Denton Ridge Correctional Facility. The rain grew heavier, drumming against the metal roof and turning the world outside into a gray blur. The transport van wound through dense forest before emerging at a clearing dominated by Denton Ridge Correctional Facility. High concrete walls stretched into the darkness, topped with razor wire that glinted under harsh floodlights. Silent watchtowers loomed at each corner, their windows reflecting the pale moonlight like vacant eyes staring down at new arrivals. The van stopped at a heavy steel gate. After several minutes of radio checks and paperwork, they rolled through into a concrete receiving bay. The engine's rumble echoed off the walls before cutting out entirely, leaving an oppressive silence broken only by the jingling of keys and the scrape of the van's doors being pulled open. "Welcome to your new home, ladies," a guard announced, helping them down with mock politeness. Her nameplate read, "Officer Martinez. Time for processing." The twins were led through a series of heavy doors into a stark intake area. The fluorescent lights were painfully bright after the darkness outside, making the white-tiled walls seem to glow. The air smelled of bleach and something else, fear maybe, soaked into the very concrete over years. "Strip," ordered another guard, snapping on latex gloves. "Everything off." Amara and Nia complied silently, keeping their faces carefully blank as they removed their clothes. The search that followed was thorough and humiliating. The guards made comments to each other as if the girls weren't even there. "Finally getting some fresh meat in here," one guard chuckled, making a show of examining their belongings. "Been too quiet lately." Next came the showers, harsh spray that alternated between scalding and freezing. The twins were doused with decontamination solution that burned their eyes and left their skin raw. Their hair, which they'd worn in neat braids since childhood, was roughly shaved off with electric clippers that pulled and caught. They were given identical gray uniforms that hung loose on their frames, along with thin canvas shoes and a single scratchy blanket each. Their old clothes and possessions were sealed in plastic bags and stored away. "Carter, A, Wing C, Cell 214, Martinez read from a clipboard. "Carter, North Wing E, Cell 147. She looked up with a smirk. "Hope you weren't planning on being roomies." The twins exchanged one quick glance before being led in opposite directions. The corridors seemed endless. Gray concrete floors, fluorescent lights in wire cages, heavy doors with small windows. Their footsteps echoed in the emptiness. Nia's cell was barely big enough for the metal bunk bolted to one wall and a stainless steel toilet sink combination in the corner. A figure huddled on the top bunk, completely still beneath a thin blanket. The door clanged shut behind her with a finality that made her chest tight. "Hi," Nia said softly to her cellmate. There was no response, not even a twitch of movement. In Wing C, Amara was being led to her cell when a commotion erupted from a side hallway. Two guards emerged, dragging a struggling girl between them. Her arms were secured behind her back in restraints, feet scraping the floor as she thrashed and screamed wordlessly. Amara kept her expression neutral but memorized every detail: the girl's face, the guards' nameplates, the exact time shown on the wall clock. Their first meal came through slots in the cell doors, a bowl of cold, lumpy grits and a single slice of stale white bread. Signs posted everywhere warned, "No talking during meals," in bold red letters. The only sounds were metal spoons scraping against plastic bowls and the occasional muffled sob. Later that afternoon, they were escorted to the facility library, a cramped room with sagging metal shelves and flickering lights. Amara immediately began a methodical survey of the space while appearing to browse randomly. Her trained eye caught the telltale glint of hidden camera lenses in the ceiling tiles, the slight bulge of audio monitoring devices behind air vents. As she pulled books from the shelves, she noticed faint markings scratched into their pages, crude maps showing parts of the facility's layout. Some appeared to be in code, using chess notation she recognized from her FBI training. She selected a worn copy of The Queen's Gambit, and using a stubby pencil from the librarian's desk, carefully added her own coded message, N4 to B6, their private signal for I'm safe. Stay alert. Across the room, Nia was making similar discoveries. She found Amara's message and responded with her own, P to K4, understood, gathering intel. To anyone else, they would look like simple chess moves scribbled by bored inmates. But the twins had spent years perfecting this system with Agent Rhodes. When evening came, Nia lay on her thin mattress listening to the sounds of the facility settling into night routine. Her cellmate still hadn't spoken or even looked at her. From across the hallway, she heard urgent whispers. "Hey, new girl," a voice hissed. "You seen Tash yet?" "Who's Tash?" Nia whispered back. "Don't," another voice cut in. "Don't even say her name. She's cursed. Bad things happen to people who get close to her." "Shut up over there," a guard shouted, banging his baton against the bars. Meanwhile, in Wing C, Amara stood at her window watching the compound through the narrow strip of glass. Movement caught her eye. A dark van with no markings was pulling through a rear gate, its headlights off. Through the van's back window, she glimpsed what looked like a girl slumped against the seat. But according to the day's transfer log she'd memorized during processing, no inmates were scheduled to leave the facility. The van disappeared into the night, leaving only questions. Amara filed away every detail: the time, the direction, the guard stationed at the gate who waved it through without checking papers. Another piece in the puzzle they'd come here to solve. The lights went out with a heavy clunk, plunging the cells into darkness broken only by faint moonlight filtering through the windows. Somewhere in the facility, a door slammed. Someone was crying. The night settled over Denton Ridge like a shroud, full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. The morning alarm blared at 4 a.m., jolting Nia from a restless sleep. A guard banged on her cell door, voice sharp in the pre-dawn darkness. "Kitchen duty, Carter. Move it." The concrete floors were ice cold under her thin canvas shoes as she shuffled with other inmates toward the industrial kitchen. Steam rose from huge steel pots, and the air was thick with the smell of bland oatmeal and burnt coffee. Nia took her assigned position at a massive sink filled with greasy water. Through the steam, she watched the guards circulating among the older inmates. Officer Martinez leaned close to a tall girl with faded track marks on her arms, whispering something that made the inmates smile nervously. Another guard, Officer Brooks, pressed himself against a young woman sorting bread, his hand lingering too long on her shoulder. "Fresh batch coming in tonight," Brooks muttered to the inmate. "Need some help with processing. You know the deal." The girl shook her head slightly, stepping away. "I can't. Not anymore." Brooks's face hardened. He grabbed her arm, fingers digging in. Two other guards appeared as if summoned, taking hold of the struggling inmate. They dragged her toward the door, her feet leaving wet marks on the floor. There was a sharp crack, followed by a muffled cry. When they brought her back through, blood dripped from her nose, speckling the gray concrete. No one moved to help. No one even looked up from their tasks. Nia's hands clenched into fists beneath the soapy water. But she forced herself to keep scrubbing, to keep her face blank and her eyes down. Later, back in her unit for recreation period, Nia sat alone at a metal table bolted to the floor. The other inmates gave her a wide berth, clustering in small groups and speaking in whispers. A shadow fell across her table. "You're in my spot." Nia looked up to see a girl about her age, maybe 16, with sharp eyes and a permanent half-smirk. She walked with a slight limp, favoring her left leg. Despite the other inmates' obvious avoidance, she carried herself with a bold confidence. "You must be Tash," Nia said quietly. Tash dropped onto the bench across from her, studying her face. "And you're one of the new twins. Word travels fast in here." She leaned forward. "Let me give you some free advice. You either shut up and survive or speak up and disappear. Simple as that." Nia met her gaze steadily. Like Sarah Martinez disappeared? The name, glimpsed on a guard's transfer list during kitchen duty, made Tash flinch almost imperceptibly. Her smirk faltered for just a moment before returning. "Never heard of her," Tash said, suddenly very interested in picking at a scratch in the table's surface. "You should focus on your own business. Survival tip number 2. Across the facility in the medical wing, Amara pushed a mop across the sterile white floors. The sharp smell of disinfectant burned her nose as she worked methodically, memorizing every detail of the layout. 2 heavy doors at the end of the hall caught her attention: Storage A and Transfer Hall. Their labels faded but readable. She noticed how the staff fell silent whenever they passed those doors, how their eyes slid away from them as if the doors didn't exist. Even the usually chatty nurses dropped their voices to whispers when working nearby. In the infirmary, a girl lay handcuffed to one of the beds, her face bruised and swollen. As Amara passed with her mop, the girl's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with surprising strength. Her cracked lips formed words without sound. "Don't let them take you there." Before Amara could respond, a nurse appeared, injecting something into the girl's IV line. Within seconds, the girl's grip went slack, her eyes rolling back as she slipped into unconsciousness. That night, unable to sleep, Nia examined the walls of her cell. Her fingers found a loose brick near the floor, and behind it was a folded scrap of paper, its edges worn soft with handling. In the dim light from the window, she carefully unfolded it. The paper contained a list of names, dates, and the words "medical transfer," written in different handwritings. Some entries were recent, others dated back months or years. None of the names appeared in any current facility records she'd seen. Sarah Martinez, medical transfer, March 15th. Jenny Cooper, medical transfer, 4/2. Aisha Washington, medical transfer, April 29th. The list went on, filling both sides of the paper. Movement caught her eye. Tash stood in the cell doorway, her face uncharacteristically serious as she watched Nia with the list. "I'll show you what they do here," Tash said, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced down the silent hallway. "But if you scream, you die. That's not a threat. It's just what happens." The darkness pressed close as Tash led Nia through the silent laundry room, their footsteps muffled by the hum of industrial dryers running their night cycle. The air was thick with the artificial scent of cheap detergent and bleach. Tash moved with practiced ease, counting steps between machines until she reached a specific spot near the back wall. "Here," Tash whispered, crouching down. Her fingers found the edges of a metal panel, carefully working it loose. They forgot this service hatch years ago when they renovated. Old maintenance tunnels run everywhere under Denton Ridge. Nia watched as Tash pulled the panel free, revealing a dark square opening barely big enough for them to squeeze through. The smell of damp concrete and rust wafted up from below. "Guards never come down here," Tash explained, already lowering herself into the hole. "Too many spiders." Nia followed, trying not to think about what else might be crawling in the darkness. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees. Water dripped somewhere in the distance and pipes creaked overhead. Tash navigated the maze of passages without hesitation, taking turns seemingly at random. "How did you find all this?" Nia whispered. 3 years gives you time to explore," Tash replied, her voice tight, "especially when you're trying to figure out why girls keep disappearing." They emerged through another access panel into a mechanical room, then slipped out a rusted door into the back courtyard. The night air was cool on their faces. Tash pulled Nia behind a stack of empty pallets, pointing toward the outer gate. "See that van? White, no windows, fake medical transport logos?" Tash's voice was barely audible. "It doesn't go to hospitals. I've tracked it for months. Goes off-grid every time. No records, no paperwork, nothing." As if on cue, headlights appeared in the distance. Another van, identical to the first, approached the gate. Tash reached into her sock and pulled out what looked like a pen. "Camera," she explained, clicking it once. "Traded 3 months of desserts for it. Been documenting everything. License plates, guard rotations, which girls get taken." They watched in silence as the van passed through security. 2 guards stepped out, exchanging quiet words with the gate officer. Tash's pen clicked steadily, recording every detail. "Why haven't you tried to escape?" Nia asked, studying Tash's face in the dim light. "You know these tunnels better than anyone." Tash's hand stilled on the pen. "Because exposing this means more than running," she said finally. "I could have gone months ago, but then who would remember the girls they take? Who would keep counting?" She looked at Nia. "Someone has to make them count." Across the facility, Amara was finishing her shift in the medical wing when Nurse Chen approached her. The older woman had kind eyes behind steel-rimmed glasses, and unlike the other staff, she actually looked at the inmates when speaking to them. "Could you help me organize these old files?" Chen asked quietly, gesturing to a stack of papers. As Amara followed her into the records room, Chen closed the door and quickly pulled several folders from beneath the stack. "Guard rosters," she whispered, sliding them to Amara. "Going back 6 months. I've seen things that aren't right. Be careful with these." Amara nodded once, memorizing Chen's face. The nurse hurried out, leaving Amara alone with the documents. Working quickly, she began charting names and dates, noting which guards were present during reported transfers. She encrypted the information using chess notation, a system she and Nia had developed years ago during their training. Night to QB3 meant night shift. Bishop's diagonal indicated transfer routes. Pawn movements tracked guard rotations. To anyone else, it would look like simple game analysis. To Nia, it would be a clear map of facility operations. Over the next few days, the twins built their separate intelligence networks without ever speaking directly. Nia focused on movement patterns and personnel, gathering information from Tash and other inmates who began to trust her. She noted which guards worked together, who had access to the vans, which girls were targeted. Amara concentrated on documentation and hierarchy, piecing together the facility's official structure while looking for gaps and inconsistencies. She tracked paperwork trails that ended abruptly, medical records with missing pages, intake forms that didn't match transfer documents. They passed information through carefully marked library books and notes hidden in predetermined locations. A dog-eared page meant new information. A chess problem written in the margins contained encrypted data. Slowly, their separate pieces began forming a complete picture. Just before lights out, Amara made her usual stop at the library. A new chess book had appeared on her designated shelf. Advanced Strategy, Queen's Gambit Variations. Inside, written in tiny numbers along the margins of a game analysis, was Nia's first coded update. 3 guards identified as regular transport escorts, 2 van departures documented in the past week, 1 girl missing from C Block, no transfer records found. Amara closed the book, committing the information to memory before returning it to the shelf. The game had started, and they were finally gathering the pieces they needed to expose what was happening at Denton Ridge. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Amara stood in line for her weekly phone call. Her orange jumpsuit felt especially scratchy today, anticipation making her skin sensitive. She clutched her allowed phone card, watching the minutes tick by on the wall clock. This call to Aunt Rosa was their lifeline, their only direct connection to the outside operation. When her turn came, she dialed the memorized number with steady fingers. 1 ring, 2 rings, then a click. "Hello?" The voice that answered was unfamiliar, sharp and cold like winter wind. Amara's throat tightened. "I'm calling for Aunt Rosa?" "Rosa is unavailable." The woman's tone held no warmth, no explanation. "Do not attempt further contact." The line went dead. Amara stared at the receiver, her hand trembling slightly now. Behind her, a guard barked, "Time's up." She replaced the phone carefully, her mind racing through contingency protocols as she walked back to her unit. A week crawled by. During their next call window, Nia tried the number. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. The silence on the other end felt heavy with meaning. That night, as Nia sat on her bunk reviewing their coded notes, a guard appeared at her cell. Without a word, he snatched the books from her hands, replacing them with identical copies, new, clean, empty of their careful documentation. When he left, Nia ran her fingers over the blank pages, heart pounding. In the library the next morning, Amara found their usual study desk. There, scratched into the wood surface in hasty letters, "Rhodes is burned. They know." She traced the words with her fingertip, feeling the rough edges of truth cutting into their carefully laid plans. Agent Rhodes, their handler, their protector, was compromised. And if they knew about him? Nia was mopping the intake area when she saw them bring in the new girl. Couldn't have been more than 15, with wide, frightened eyes and shoulders that curved inward like wilting flowers. 2 guards led her toward the back rooms, not the regular processing area. "Got another transfer package here," one guard said to the other, his voice casual as discussing the weather. "Need full eval prep." The girl's eyes met Nia's for just a moment before they disappeared around the corner. Nia kept mopping, her knuckles white around the handle. Hours later, Amara was sorting medical supplies in the clinic when they brought the same girl in. But she was different now. Eyes vacant, body limp. Purple bruises bloomed along her collarbone like poisonous flowers. The nurse on duty barely glanced up from her magazine as they wheeled the girl through to the back room. When Amara checked again later, the room was empty. No paperwork, no record, just another ghost in the machine. That evening at dinner, Amara found something buried in her bland mashed potatoes, a chess piece, a bishop snapped cleanly in half. She slipped it into her pocket before anyone could see, but the message was clear. Their cover was cracking. The system had caught their scent. After lights out, Nia lay awake in her bunk listening to the quiet sobs of her cellmate. Their carefully constructed operation was unraveling. Without Rosa, without Rhodes, without their secure communication channels, they were truly alone now, and the girls kept disappearing. The next morning, Nia cornered Tash in the laundry room during their work detail. Steam from the industrial washers filled the air, making their whispered conversations safer from the ever-present microphones. "We need to get to the control room," Nia said, folding sheets with mechanical precision. "That's where they keep the real records. Security footage, transfer documents, everything." Tash paused in her sorting. "That's suicide, triple locked, guarded 24/7. Even the maintenance tunnels don't go there." "But you know a way." It wasn't a question. Nia had seen how Tash moved through the facility, like a ghost who knew every secret passage. "Maybe." Tash's hands resumed their work, but her eyes were distant, calculating. "But why should I help you? I've seen plenty of heroes come through here. They all disappear eventually." "We're not heroes," Nia said firmly. "We're just trying to expose the truth, but we need proof. Hard evidence that can't be buried or denied." Tash was quiet for a long moment, mechanically folding and stacking. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible above the machinery. "There's a way, through the old ventilation system, but I'll only show you on one condition." She turned to face Nia fully, her eyes hard with years of survival. "You expose this. You take us with you, all of us. No heroes without survivors. We're not just your evidence, we're people, and we deserve to see them pay." Nia held Tash's gaze, understanding the weight of the promise being asked. This wasn't just about gathering intelligence anymore. It was about bearing witness, about making sure every girl who had disappeared from Denton Ridge would finally be counted. "I promise," Nia said, "all of us, together." Tash nodded once, then returned to her laundry as a guard passed by. But her words hung in the steamy air between them, a contract written in survival and sealed with hope. That night, Nia left a final coded message for Amara in their latest chess book. Found a door. Time to move. The next phase would be the riskiest yet, but they had no choice. Their handlers were gone, their cover was blown, and somewhere in the bowels of Denton Ridge, another van was being prepared for another midnight run. They couldn't wait for backup anymore. The game had changed, and now they were playing for more than just intelligence. They were playing for lives. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual dinner chaos. Metal trays clattering, guards shouting orders, and inmates shuffling through the food line. Amara sat at her assigned table, picking at the bland meatloaf while discreetly watching the clock. 8 minutes until shift change, the perfect window. She lifted a forkful to her mouth, then suddenly gasped. Her hand flew to her throat, eyes widening in panic. The fork clattered to the floor as she started wheezing, her chest heaving dramatically. "Can't breathe," she choked out, sliding off the bench. Several inmates nearby backed away, creating a small circle of space around her convulsing form. Across the room, right on cue, Nia slammed her tray into another girl's face. "Who you calling a snitch?" she screamed, launching herself at the startled inmate. The cafeteria erupted into chaos as guards rushed to break up the fight. "Medical emergency," a guard shouted, noticing Amara on the floor. "Get her to the clinic." Two guards hoisted Amara up, half dragging her through the corridors while she continued gasping and clutching her throat. Behind them, she could hear the sounds of the fight, exactly the distraction they needed. The clinic's fluorescent lights were harsh after the dim cafeteria. A nurse rushed forward as the guards deposited Amara on an exam table. "What happened?" "Some kind of allergic reaction," one guard said. "Started during dinner." "I'll handle it from here," the nurse said, already reaching for an antihistamine kit. The guards nodded and left, heading back to deal with the cafeteria chaos. Amara kept up her performance, wheezing and trembling while carefully observing everything around her. The clinic was laid out in an L shape, with the main treatment area in front and a long corridor extending to the right. 3 security cameras, one above the entrance, one covering the treatment area, and one at the far end of the hall. All the angles left a small blind spot near the supply closet. The nurse bustled around, checking Amara's vitals and preparing an injection. "This should help with the reaction," she said, swabbing Amara's arm with alcohol. Amara let her breathing gradually steady after the shot, though she was never actually in distress. "Still feeling dizzy," she mumbled, swaying slightly on the exam table. "Might be sick." "Let me get you a basin," the nurse said, turning to the supply cabinet. As she moved, Amara's hand darted out with practiced precision, lifting the keycard from the nurse's pocket in one smooth motion. "Just rest here for a bit," the nurse said, returning with a plastic basin. "I need to check on another patient. Call if you need anything." The moment the nurse disappeared down the hall, Amara slipped off the table. Moving quickly through the camera blind spots, she reached the sealed corridor marked Storage A. The stolen keycard worked perfectly. The door clicked open with a soft beep. Inside, rows of filing cabinets lined the walls. Amara moved silently through the room, scanning labels and memorizing the layout. One section held intake forms, dozens of them, all partially completed with crucial details missing. Another cabinet contained medical charts labeled with girls' names she recognized from the missing persons list. But it was the back wall that made her blood run cold. Floor-to-ceiling shelves stocked with pharmaceuticals, sedatives, trauma medications, and drugs she didn't recognize. Each bottle and package was carefully labeled with a girl's name and ID number. Footsteps in the hallway sent Amara diving behind a large supply cart. The door opened, and she held her breath as multiple sets of feet entered the room. "Set her down here," a gruff voice ordered. Through a gap in the cart's shelving, Amara watched 2 guards wheel in a gurney. On it lay a girl, maybe 14, her eyes half open but unfocused. Her wrists were secured with padded restraints. 2 men in dark suits followed them in. One pulled out a phone while the other examined the girl with clinical detachment. The first man spoke into his phone. "Package is ready for inspection. Yes, sir. No complications." He listened for a moment, then added, "Understood. Whitmore says this one's high value. Package her with the next batch." The second suit nodded and produced a clipboard. "Add her to Thursday's manifest. Premium rate for this one." They spoke in euphemisms, but their meaning was clear. Amara memorized their faces, their voices, the way they moved. One of them had a federal ID badge clipped to his belt. She could just make out the seal, but not the agency. After they left, taking the girl with them, Amara waited several long minutes before emerging from her hiding spot. She replaced the keycard in the nurse's pocket during another fake bout of nausea, then allowed herself to be escorted back to her cell as her symptoms subsided. In the pre-dawn darkness of her cell, Amara pulled out the small notebook she'd managed to keep hidden. Working quickly, she sketched the clinic's layout, marking camera positions and security measures. She encoded everything using their chess notation system. Positions became chess moves, security features became piece formations. Later that morning in the library, she slipped the coded pages into a worn copy of Basic Chess Strategies and returned it to the shelf. Within an hour, Naya checked out the same book. Sitting at her usual study table, Nia carefully extracted the hidden message. Her hands trembled as she decoded Amara's chess notation, piecing together the horrifying reality of what her sister had discovered. The missing girls, the federal involvement, the clinical efficiency of it all, and Whitmore's name, proving the judge's connection went far deeper than they'd imagined. Their handler was gone, their backup had vanished, and now, somewhere in the facility, people were watching them, waiting to see if they'd reveal themselves as more than just two teenage inmates. Nia slipped the decoded notes into her shirt and returned the chess book to its shelf. Above her, a security camera tracked her movement, its red light blinking steadily in the quiet library. The morning light filtered weakly through the barred windows of Denton Ridge's cafeteria. Nia stood in the breakfast line, her plastic tray held tight against her chest as she scanned the room. Something was wrong. The familiar faces were all there, except one. Tash's usual spot at the corner table sat empty. Her assigned breakfast tray remained untouched on the serving counter, the lumpy oatmeal growing cold. Nia's heart rate quickened, but she kept her face carefully blank as she approached a guard. "Where's Freeman?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "She owes me a book." The guard barely glanced up from his coffee. "Solitary," he grunted. Nia's hands tightened on her tray. In Denton Ridge, solitary wasn't just isolation. It was code for something darker. Girls who went to solitary often didn't come back to general population. Some didn't come back at all. "What did she do?" Nia pressed, earning a sharp look from the guard. "Move along," he barked, "unless you want to join her." Nia shuffled away, her breakfast forgotten. She watched the clock, waiting for the post-meal cleaning period when inmates were assigned to various work details. The moment she was released from the cafeteria, she headed for the laundry room, her heart pounding. The service hatch Tash had shown her was hidden behind a broken dryer, concealed by a stack of moldy sheets. Nia glanced around, making sure the cameras were pointed away, then quickly slipped behind the dryer. The hatch was still loose. Tash's work with a stolen screwdriver had made it easy to open without tools. The maintenance tunnels were dark and damp, smelling of mildew and rust. Nia moved carefully, counting her steps just as Tash had taught her. 20 paces to the first turn, 12 to the electrical panel, 8 more to the storage closet. Something caught her eye, a flash of white against the dark concrete floor. Nia's breath caught in her throat. It was a shoe. Tash's shoe, the one with the red threading she'd added herself. The laces were broken, snapped from struggle, and there, along the side, dark stains that could only be blood. Nia picked up the shoe with trembling hands. Tash hadn't gone to solitary willingly. She'd fought, had been dragged through these very tunnels, and now she was… where? Moving as quickly as she dared, Nia returned to her unit. She had to wait 2 agonizing hours for library period, her mind racing with possibilities, each worse than the last. The moment she was allowed in, she grabbed a chess set from the activity shelf. Working quickly, she folded a paper from her notebook into a small square. Her message was brief, but urgent. They took her. "I need to move now." She slipped the note into the folded chessboard and positioned it on the shelf where Amara always looked. Across the library, Amara received the message within minutes. Her face remained impassive as she read it, but her fingers tightened on the paper. She knew what she had to do. The nurse, Sarah Matthews according to her badge, was restocking supplies when Amara approached the clinic window. "My stomach again," Amara said loudly enough for the guards to hear. Then quieter. "We need to talk." Inside the exam room, Amara dropped the act. "I need access to the patient transfer logs," she whispered. "All of them." The nurse paled. "I can't. They monitor everything. They'll know." "They're taking children," Amara said, her voice hard. "You've seen it. You know what happens in Storage A. How long before they decide you know too much? You're next if you don't help." Sarah's hands shook as she took Amara's pulse, maintaining the pretense of an exam. "They'll kill me," she breathed. "They'll kill you anyway," Amara replied. "At least this way, you help stop them." After a long moment, Sarah gave a tiny nod. "Tonight, 3rd shift, I'll leave the records card unlocked." Nia didn't wait for Amara's signal. During afternoon yard time, she positioned herself near the basketball court. waiting until the guard rotation left a brief gap in coverage. Then she dropped, her body going rigid, limbs jerking in a convincing seizure. "Medical emergency," someone shouted. Guards rushed over, calling for a stretcher. Nia kept convulsing, letting her eyes roll back. She'd studied seizures for weeks, preparing for this moment. The clinic lights were harsh overhead as they wheeled her in. A doctor she didn't recognize ordered Ativan, and Nia felt the sharp stick of a needle. The sedative worked quickly. Her muscles really did begin to relax, her mind growing foggy. They strapped her to the gurney with padded restraints. "For her safety," someone said. Through increasingly heavy eyelids, Nia watched the ceiling tiles pass by as they wheeled her deeper into the clinic. Just before the drugs pulled her under completely, they passed a door left slightly ajar. Through the crack, Nia saw a familiar face, Tash, lying on another gurney. Her friend's face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. Her arm lay exposed, marked with what looked like a shipping barcode. Tash's eyes were open but vacant, her gaze empty. Whatever they'd given her was strong enough to subdue someone who never stopped fighting. Nia tried to call out, to move, to do something, but the sedative was too powerful. The last thing she saw was Tash's marked arm before darkness claimed her completely. The harsh fluorescent lights pierced through Nia's eyelids as consciousness slowly returned. Her head felt like it was stuffed with cotton, and her mouth was desert dry. She tried to move but found her wrists and ankles secured with padded restraints to a cold metal gurney. Through blurred vision, she took in her surroundings. The room was underground, windowless, with stark white walls and metal doors. The air smelled sharp and clinical, heavy with antiseptic. Along both walls, other girls lay on gurneys similar to hers, clear IV bags dripping steadily into their arms. Some of the girls were completely unconscious. Others whimpered softly or mumbled incoherently. Two guards in dark uniforms moved between the gurneys, checking plastic tags attached to each patient's wrist. A woman in a white lab coat stood at a metal desk, scribbling notes on a clipboard. When one of the girls called out weakly for water, the woman didn't even look up. Nia's mind raced despite the fog of drugs. She had to stay alert, had to find a way out. Carefully, she kept her breathing slow and even, mimicking deep sedation. Through barely opened eyes, she watched the guards' movements, timing their rounds. When they moved to the far end of the room, Nia slowly tested her restraints. The right wrist cuff was slightly looser than the others. She worked her hand back and forth, ignoring the way the rough material chafed her skin. With agonizing slowness, she managed to create just enough space to reach the IV in her arm. A familiar face caught her attention from two gurneys over. Tash lay there, her usual fierce expression replaced by a drug-induced vacancy. Dark bruises bloomed across her face, and her arm still bore the strange barcode marking Nia had glimpsed earlier. "Tash," Nia mouthed silently, willing her friend to show some sign of awareness. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, ever so slightly, Tash's index finger twitched. She was still in there, still fighting. Meanwhile, 3 floors above, Amara was executing her part of the plan. The library's ventilation system connected to a network of maintenance ducts she'd carefully mapped over the past weeks. She'd chosen her timing carefully. The sympathetic nurse, Sarah, had promised an 8-minute window without camera coverage in the clinic's rear section. Amara removed the loose vent cover behind the reference shelves, her movements hidden by tall bookstacks. The duct was narrow but navigable. She'd measured it against her shoulders during previous reconnaissance. Quickly but silently, she pulled herself up and in. The metal was cold against her palms as she crawled through the darkness. Left at the 3rd junction. Straight past 2 vertical drops. Right at the T intersection. She'd memorized every turn, every distance. One wrong move would put her in a dead end or worse, directly above an occupied room. When she reached the clinic access point, she paused, listening. The ventilation fan hummed steadily, masking any sounds from below. According to her intel, this shaft led directly to the storage area, adjacent to the underground chamber. Sarah had confirmed that the room would be empty during shift change. Amara carefully loosened the vent cover, catching it before it could clatter to the floor. She lowered herself down, landing in a crouch. The storage room was dim, filled with shelves of medical supplies. Through the door's window, she could see the hallway leading to the chamber. A fire extinguisher hung on the wall. Amara grabbed it, testing its weight. Not ideal, but it would have to do. She checked her watch. 4 minutes left in the camera blackout. The guard never saw her coming. As he turned the corner, Amara swung the extinguisher in a controlled arc, catching him in the temple. He dropped without a sound. She caught his keycard before it could clatter to the floor. The second guard was reaching for his radio when Amara burst through the door. She sprayed him full in the face with the extinguisher's white foam, then brought the canister down hard on the back of his head as he stumbled backward. An alarm began to wail, harsh and piercing. They had maybe 2 minutes before reinforcements arrived. Amara rushed to Nia's gurney, quickly releasing the restraints. "Can you walk?" "Help me with Tash," Nia said, already pulling out her IV. Together, they freed the semi-conscious girl from her restraints. The woman in the lab coat was backing toward a phone on the wall, but Amara's glare stopped her cold. "The laundry chute," Amara said, supporting Tash's weight between them. "It empties into the drainage trench. It's our only shot." They half-carried, half-dragged Tash through the storage room to where a large metal chute gaped in the wall. The opening was meant for soiled linens, but it was wide enough for a person. Far below, they could hear the rush of water in the drainage system. "Hold tight to her," Amara instructed. They positioned themselves on either side of Tash, gripping her securely between them. 3, 2, 1. The descent was rough and terrifying. The metal walls of the chute scraped their arms and legs as they slid downward at increasing speed. Tash remained limp between them, offering no resistance. After what felt like forever, they shot out the bottom into icy water. The drainage trench was about 4 feet deep, the current swift but not overwhelming. They broke the surface gasping, still maintaining their grip on Tash. The water helped clear some of the fog from Nia's mind as they waded toward a maintenance access ladder. Getting back inside undetected was harder than escaping. They had to time their movements perfectly between guard patrols, all while supporting Tash's unconscious form. By the time they reached their unit, all 3 were soaked, shivering, and covered in bruises. But they were alive. They settled Tash as comfortably as possible in Nia's bottom bunk, checking her breathing and pulse. Still strong, despite everything they'd been through. Amara pulled a Bible from under her mattress, one she'd hollowed out weeks ago. Inside, she began writing rapidly in their custom chess notation, recording every detail of the night's events. The evidence was mounting. Soon, it would be time to get it out. The morning light filtered weakly through the barred windows as Amara made her way to the library, the altered Bible tucked carefully under her arm. Her steps were measured, casual, just another inmate returning a book. Inside, her heart hammered against her ribs. The library's drop bin system was simple, 2 wooden crates marked in and out, used for the facility's religious book exchange program with local churches. The program had been Rosa's idea, implemented months before the twins arrived. It provided a perfect channel for passing information to the outside. Amara approached the desk, nodding to the elderly volunteer librarian who barely glanced up from her romance novel. The Bible looked perfectly ordinary, worn leather cover, gilt-edged pages, a few devotional bookmarks poking out. Only the small red dot sticker on its spine, barely larger than a pencil point, marked it as special. She placed it carefully in the out crate, positioning it between a water-damaged hymnal and a stack of prayer books. The sticker was Rosa's signal, their pre-arranged marking that meant urgent intelligence was hidden inside. Amara lingered for a moment, straightening other books, making her actions appear natural. Down in the east wing, the morning's peace shattered as the warden's surprise inspection began. Guards burst into cells without warning, upending mattresses and dumping personal items onto the floor. The sound of metal lockers being wrenched open echoed through the corridors. Nia sat perfectly still on her bunk as 2 guards tore through her cell. They scattered her few possessions across the concrete floor. Standard issue clothes, a thin blanket, approved toiletries. One guard found a folded paper tucked inside her pillowcase. Nia's stomach clenched, but she kept her expression neutral. The guard unfolded it, revealing lines of what appeared to be random letters and numbers. He showed it to his partner, who squinted at it suspiciously. "What's this supposed to be?" he demanded, thrusting the paper in Nia's face. "Chess moves," Nia said quietly. "I write them down to practice strategies." The guard snorted and crumpled the paper. "Looks like garbage to me." He tossed it into the pile of scattered belongings. "Flag her anyway. Could be some kind of gang code." Nia watched silently as they moved on to the next cell. Her hands were steady as she began picking up her things, but inside, warning bells were ringing. Being flagged meant increased surveillance, guards watching more closely, monitoring her movements, restricting her access to certain areas. In the medical wing, Sarah, the sympathetic nurse, was clearing out her desk. Her transfer notice had come that morning, effective immediately. She'd been reassigned to a facility 3 states away. The message was clear. Someone had noticed her helping the twins. When Amara arrived for her scheduled medication check, Sarah was waiting. Under the pretense of checking Amara's blood pressure, she slipped something into the girl's palm, a small USB drive, no larger than a thumbnail. "Transfer logs," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "Security footage from body cams, booking records that don't match the official ones. Everything I could get access to over the past year." Her fingers trembled slightly as she removed the blood pressure cuff. "Be careful." Amara nodded almost imperceptibly, palming the drive. "Thank you," she breathed. Then, louder, "My pressure okay?" "All normal," Sarah said, marking something on her chart. It would be the last time they saw each other. Back in the cell block, Tash was recovering slowly. The drugs were working their way out of her system, leaving her groggy but more alert. Her fingers, though still shaky, worked carefully at a wooden chess piece, a knight she'd managed to steal from the recreation room. Using a sharpened paperclip, she had hollowed out the base of the piece, creating a perfect hiding spot. When Amara showed her the USB drive, Tash's hands were steady enough to help conceal it inside the knight. They sealed it with a bit of gum, making the bottom appear solid and unmarked. Miles away in Washington, D.C., Rosa sat at her kitchen table, staring at the Bible that had arrived in that morning's mail. The package had come through their secure channel, a series of handoffs designed to be untraceable. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. The pages appeared normal at first glance, filled with the usual verses and chapters. But Rosa knew what to look for. There, hidden in the margins and between lines, were carefully coded messages. Chess notation that only she and the twins understood. As she turned to Psalms, something fell from between the pages, a small flash drive. Rosa's breath caught. She hadn't expected this level of intelligence so soon. Whatever was on this drive had to be significant. Her laptop hummed to life. Rosa plugged in the drive, her face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. The first video began to play. Grainy body cam footage showing a dark hallway, a semi-conscious girl being dragged away, muffled voices discussing shipment values. Rosa's expression remained stone still as she watched. Her hands didn't shake as she reached for the burner phone hidden in her desk drawer. She dialed a number from memory, one that would never appear in any phone records. The line connected after 2 rings. Rosa's voice was steel when she spoke. "Leak everything tonight." The evening chapel service began like any other at Denton Ridge. Girls shuffled in wearing identical gray uniforms, their movements watched by stern-faced guards who lined the back wall like sentinels. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered overhead, casting an artificial glow that made everyone's skin look sickly and pale. Amara and Nia were marched in with their unit, taking their usual spots in the middle rows of hard wooden pews. The chapel itself was austere, bare concrete walls, a simple wooden cross, and windows too high and narrow to see anything but strips of darkening sky. Warden Phillips stood at the pulpit, his crisp uniform perfectly pressed, his smile as artificial as the lighting. He was a tall man with graying temples and cold eyes that never quite matched his practiced expressions of concern. Tonight he seemed particularly pleased with himself as he shuffled his notes and cleared his throat. "Good evening, girls," he began, his voice carrying that familiar false warmth. "Tonight's sermon will focus on obedience and accepting one's proper place in God's plan." The irony wasn't lost on the twins. They sat perfectly still, shoulders touching, as Phillips launched into his message. His words droned on about submission and authority, about knowing one's station in life. Several guards nodded along while others stared blankly ahead, clearly bored with the routine. 15 minutes into the sermon, the first phone buzzed. A guard in the back row quickly silenced it, looking embarrassed. Phillips shot him a disapproving glance but continued speaking about divine hierarchy and earthly authority. Then another phone went off, and another. Within seconds, the chapel filled with the sound of multiple devices buzzing and chirping. The guards began checking their phones, their faces shifting from annoyance to confusion to shock. "Turn those devices off immediately," Phillips snapped from the pulpit, his fake smile cracking at the edges. But the guards weren't listening anymore. Their eyes were glued to their screens, where videos and documents were flooding every social media platform and news outlet. One guard's face went pale as he recognized himself in footage from a body camera, shown escorting a sedated girl to a waiting van. "Sir," one of the senior guards called out, his voice shaking, "you need to see this." Phillips stepped down from the pulpit, his movements sharp with irritation. He grabbed the offered phone and froze. On the screen was his own face, caught in high-definition security footage, accepting an envelope from a man in an expensive suit. A man who had been identified in the caption as one of Judge Whitmore's associates. The first guard broke ranks and ran. He pushed through the chapel doors without a word, keys jingling at his belt as he fled. His departure seemed to trigger something in the others. Another guard shouted, "Lock it down," while fumbling with his radio. The chapel erupted into chaos. Girls who had been dozing through the sermon were now fully alert, whispering and pointing as more guards lost their composure. Some inmates began standing up, sensing the shift in power. Others remained frozen in their seats, unsure whether to move. The emergency siren began to wail, its harsh sound echoing through the chapel's concrete walls. Red emergency lights started flashing, painting everyone in pulses of crimson. Phillips grabbed another guard's phone, his face contorting as he scrolled through the flood of leaked information. There were videos of Judge Whitmore accepting bribes, audio recordings of him arranging special sentences for girls who caught certain buyers' interest. Documentation showed how many girls had disappeared from the system, their records altered or erased entirely. Names of missing girls, dozens of them, scrolled across screens along with dates, locations, and transaction amounts. "Who did this?" Phillips roared, his carefully maintained facade completely shattered. He threw the phone against the wall where it cracked but continued displaying its damning evidence. "Lock down the facility. Now!" Amara's fingers found Nia's in the chaos, squeezing tight. Around them, some girls had begun to cry, while others sat in stunned silence. The guards were shouting into their radios, demanding instructions, receiving only static or panicked responses. Miles away in the elegant dining room of the Oakwood Country Club, Judge Harold Whitmore was enjoying his usual Thursday night dinner. He sat at his regular table, a glass of expensive bourbon at his elbow, his bow tie slightly loosened after a long day of sentencing young lives to destruction. A waiter approached his table, looking uncertain. "Judge Whitmore? You might want to see this, sir." He held out his phone, opened to a breaking news alert. Whitmore took the phone impatiently, then felt all the blood drain from his face. There he was, in crystal-clear security footage, accepting cash from a known trafficking ringleader. His voice played through the phone's speaker. "The Carter girls? Yes, they'll fetch a premium. Young, intelligent, attractive. Exactly what our buyers want." More footage followed. His private office meetings, his late-night calls, his visits to Denton Ridge's special wing. Every careful move he'd made over years of building his criminal empire was being broadcast to the world. His name and face were everywhere, attached to headlines that used words like trafficking, corruption, and systematic abuse. Back in the chapel, the chaos continued to unfold. Guards were abandoning their posts, more concerned with destroying evidence or saving themselves than maintaining order. The warden was screaming into his phone, demanding to know how this had happened, who had accessed the secure files, who had betrayed them. Amara turned to her sister, their hands still clasped tight. For the first time since they'd entered Denton Ridge, a genuine smile crossed her face. In the flashing red emergency lights, with sirens wailing and their captors unraveling, she leaned close to Nia's ear and whispered a single word: checkmate. Dawn broke over Denton Ridge with an unusual sound, the steady thrum of helicopter rotors. The noise grew louder as black shapes appeared against the pale morning sky, circling the facility like dark birds of prey. On the ground, a convoy of black FBI SUVs rolled up to the main gates, their tinted windows reflecting the rising sun. Inside the facility, the night shift guards were the first to spot them. Word spread quickly through the corridors, triggering a panicked scramble in the administrative offices. Guards and staff members rushed to destroy evidence, feeding document after document into overworked shredders that whined in protest. "Faster!" barked a supervisor, shoving more files into a young guard's arms. "Get rid of everything from Storage A." The sound of shredding paper mixed with the distant helicopter noise, creating a frantic symphony of desperation. In the warden's office, Phillips was in a full rage, throwing open filing cabinets and emptying them onto his desk. His usually pristine appearance had crumbled. His tie hung loose, his shirt was untucked, and sweat darkened the collar of his uniform. He grabbed his phone, barking orders between cursing. "Lock down every exit, no one gets in or out." His voice cracked with panic. "Get all inmates to the rec yard, now, full head count." Throughout the facility, guards began rounding up inmates from their cells and units. The girls were marched out in lines, many still in their sleep clothes, confused and afraid as they were herded toward the recreation yard. The morning air was cool, and many of them shivered as they stood in formation. Amara and Nia found each other in the crowd, their eyes meeting briefly before they positioned themselves side by side. Tash limped over to join them, her face tense but determined. Around them, other girls whispered and pointed at the helicopters overhead, their voices a mix of fear and hope. Carefully, making sure no guard was watching, Amara pulled something from her sleeve. A chess piece, the White Queen. She'd hollowed it out and filled it with a tightly folded paper containing emergency contacts, safe house locations, and instructions coded in chess notation. It was their backup plan, their insurance policy if things went wrong. She passed it smoothly to another inmate, a quiet girl named Maria who worked in the kitchen. Maria took it without a word, understanding its importance from previous conversations. The piece disappeared into her pocket just as guards began their head count. The warden appeared at the yard's edge, flanked by armed officers. His face was red with rage and fear as he watched his guards counting inmates. The helicopters grew louder, now clearly visible as FBI aircraft. Their rotors whipped up dust and loose papers across the yard. Suddenly, a massive crash echoed from the administrative wing. The FBI had breached the building. The sound of breaking glass and splintering wood carried across the facility, followed immediately by gunfire. The sharp pop of pistols mixed with the deeper sound of tactical weapons. Several guards at the yard's perimeter looked at each other, then broke ranks. 3 of them turned and ran toward the woods, abandoning their posts without a word. Their footsteps disappeared into the tree line as shouts and more gunfire erupted from the main building. Federal agents in tactical gear swarmed through the facility, their movements precise and coordinated. They cleared the administrative offices first, then moved toward the medical wing. When they reached the underground clinic, they found what the twins had documented: girls strapped to gurneys, sedated and tagged like packages. Medical teams in FBI jackets rushed in behind the tactical units. They began freeing the restrained girls, checking vital signs, and starting emergency treatment. One agent radioed out, "We need more ambulances. Multiple victims requiring immediate care." The warden had disappeared from the yard's edge. He emerged minutes later wearing a guard's uniform, trying to blend in with the chaos. He limped slightly as he moved toward the service tunnel, the same escape route he'd used for years to transport girls out of the facility. But Tash saw him. She knew that limp, had memorized it during countless nights of secret observation. Without hesitation, she pointed and shouted, "There!" The warden. 2 FBI agents turned at her cry. The warden broke into a run, his limp more pronounced as he sprinted toward the tunnel entrance. The agents raised their weapons, ordering him to stop. He reached for something in his stolen uniform. The shots rang out sharp and clear. The warden stumbled, then fell. Blood spread across his back as he tried to crawl toward the fence. He made it another few feet before collapsing completely, his borrowed uniform soaking red against the morning grass. By the time agents reached him, he was gone. The raid continued methodically through every corner of Denton Ridge. Agents secured evidence, freed girls from solitary confinement, and began the massive task of documenting everything they found. Medical teams worked quickly, prioritizing the most serious cases for immediate transport. Through it all, Amara and Nia stood together in the yard, watching their mission's culmination unfold. When agents finally approached them, their badges displayed clearly. The twins exchanged a silent look. It was over. This part, at least. "Agents Carter," one of the FBI team leaders said quietly, "we need you to come with us for debriefing." The twins nodded, their training taking over again. As they were led toward one of the waiting SUVs, they caught a final glimpse of Denton Ridge, its walls no longer a prison, its secrets finally exposed to the light of day. Their mission had succeeded, but they knew this was just one facility, one operation, one small victory in a much larger fight. News vans and satellite trucks clogged the circular driveway of Judge Harold Whitmore's Georgian mansion, their logos a kaleidoscope of local and national media outlets. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder on his manicured lawn, their microphones ready, cameras pointed at the massive oak door. But the house stood silent, its windows dark and empty. Inside, federal agents moved methodically through rooms larger than some apartments. Designer suits hung untouched in walk-in closets. Crystal decanters sat half-empty on antique sideboards. In Whitmore's study, drawers had been emptied in haste, their contents scattered across Persian rugs. A wall safe hung open, cleaned out except for a few worthless papers. "Sir," a young agent called from the master bedroom, "you need to see this." The lead investigator followed the voice upstairs. The bedroom was a mess of pulled-out drawers and discarded clothes. The agent pointed to the closet floor, where a false panel had been pried open. Inside lay an empty gun case, several burner phones still in their packaging, and torn pieces of what appeared to be a passport photo. "He planned for this," the lead agent said, pulling out his phone. "Get me the field office, now." Within hours, the manhunt machinery cranked into high gear. Whitmore's face appeared on digital billboards across the southeast. His name and description blasted across every law enforcement channel. Border Patrol received his details. Airports heightened security. The judge who had sentenced countless children to hell had become America's most wanted man. In a dingy motel room just outside Montgomery, Alabama, Whitmore sat on the edge of a sagging bed, his eyes fixed on a small television. The raid on Denton Ridge played on repeat across every news channel. He watched federal agents leading away guards in handcuffs, saw medical teams helping dazed girls into ambulances, his carefully constructed empire crumbling in high definition. His hands shook as he pulled out one of his new burner phones. He'd memorized the numbers: judges, district attorneys, sheriffs, all part of his network, all compromised. The first number rang endlessly. The second went straight to voicemail. The third had been disconnected. One by one, his powerful friends abandoned him. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he opened his briefcase. Inside, a thick manila folder contained what he called his insurance policy. Detailed records of every official who had helped him, every bribe paid, every child trafficked. Names, dates, bank accounts, enough evidence to bring down dozens of powerful people across multiple states. Whitmore pulled out the papers, spreading them across the stained bedspread. His mind raced through scenarios. He could trade this information for immunity. He could threaten to expose everyone if they didn't help him escape. He could... His thoughts were interrupted by his phone buzzing, a text from an unknown number. "They're coming." Miles away, in a secure office, Rosa Bennett sat surrounded by monitors. Her fingers flew across keyboards as she tracked cell tower pings, triangulating Whitmore's location. Years of counterintelligence experience guided her movements as she narrowed down his position. "Got you," she whispered, marking the location on her map. She sent the coordinates to the FBI's tactical team, but she didn't stop there. With a few keystrokes, she routed the same information through anonymous channels to major news outlets. The public deserved to watch this monster fall. Whitmore threw his belongings into his briefcase in a panic. He'd stayed too long, gotten sloppy. The motel parking lot was still quiet, but he knew that wouldn't last. He rushed to his car, a used sedan bought with cash, and peeled out onto the highway. He drove for hours, taking back roads, switching directions randomly. Every police car made his heart race. Every helicopter sound sent him searching the sky. He pulled into a rest stop just past the Georgia state line, his bladder burning and his nerves shot. The rest stop was nearly empty, a few truckers sleeping in their cabs, a family minivan parked near the vending machines. Whitmore hurried toward the bathroom, clutching his briefcase. He didn't notice the young police officer watching him from beside his cruiser. "Excuse me, sir," the officer called out. "Mind if I see some ID?" Whitmore froze. His hand tightened on the briefcase. The officer approached slowly, one hand resting casually near his weapon. Whitmore's mind raced through options before settling on the one that had always worked before: money. "Officer," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I think we can work something out." He opened his briefcase just enough to show the stacks of cash inside. $50,000, right now. You never saw me." The officer's face hardened. His weapon cleared its holster in one smooth motion. "Hands where I can see them." Whitmore dropped the briefcase, sending cash spilling across the pavement. He turned to run, but found himself facing 3 more officers, all with weapons drawn. Red and blue lights suddenly flooded the rest stop as hidden police vehicles emerged from their positions. "Harold Whitmore," one officer announced, "you are under arrest." As they forced him to his knees, Whitmore began screaming, "I'm a patriot. I protected order. You don't understand what I was trying to do." News helicopters appeared overhead, their cameras capturing every moment. Whitmore's face, red, contorted with rage, stripped of its judicial dignity, filled screens across America. The man who had hidden behind his bench while destroying young lives was finally exposed in the harsh light of justice. Local stations interrupted regular programming to show his arrest. Cable news networks ran the footage on loop. Social media exploded with clips and screenshots. By nightfall, there wasn't a screen in America that hadn't shown Judge Harold Whitmore being led away in handcuffs. His empire of corruption finally crumbled to dust. The federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. hummed with tension as survivors from across the country gathered to testify. Security was tight, with armed marshals posted at every entrance. Inside the main chamber, rows of spectators sat in hushed anticipation as the first witness took the stand. She was barely 18, her hands trembling as she gripped the microphone. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I was 13 when Judge Whitmore sentenced me to Denton Ridge for stealing food from a convenience store. One by one, they came forward, women in their 20s and 30s, some with children now, others still bearing physical and emotional scars from their time in custody. Each testimony painted a darker picture of systematic abuse and trafficking, masked as juvenile justice. They would come at night, a woman named Maria testified, her eyes fixed on some distant point. If you were chosen, they'd say you were going for medical evaluation. Some girls never came back. We'd ask about them and the guards would say they were transferred, but we knew better. The prosecution presented medical records, showing patterns of sedation and unexplained injuries, transfer documents with falsified signatures, guard rotation schedules that coincided with disappearances. The evidence mounted day after day, building an undeniable picture of organized exploitation. A former nurse from another facility broke down on the stand. "I knew something was wrong," she sobbed, "but they threatened my family. They said they'd make sure I never worked again. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The committee members sat grim-faced as they reviewed surveillance footage showing girls being loaded into unmarked vans. Financial records revealed payments routed through shell companies. Phone logs showed calls between judges, wardens, and known trafficking networks. On the 4th day, Tash entered the closed hearing room. Security had been doubled, and all recording devices were banned. She walked with a slight limp, her face set in determination. "I spent 6 years in Denton Ridge," she began, her voice low but clear. "I documented everything I could. Every guard rotation, every transfer, every girl who disappeared." She pulled out a worn notebook, its pages filled with careful observations and crude maps. The committee leaned forward as Tash explained her drawings. "This tunnel here," she pointed, "connected to the loading dock. That's where the vans would park. And this room, they called it Storage A. That's where they kept girls before transport." Her testimony lasted hours. She described the system of bribes, the coded language used by staff, the way certain girls were tagged for special handling. When asked why she stayed so long instead of trying to escape, Tash's eyes flashed. "Someone had to remember," she said firmly. "Someone had to be able to tell the truth about what happened to us." The twins' chess pieces were brought forward next, displayed in clear evidence boxes. An FBI cryptographer explained how the simple game pieces had been used to encode complex information about guard patterns, security weaknesses, and victim identities. The bishop represented medical staff, the expert explained. The knight stood for guard rotations. Each piece, when placed on specific squares, conveyed different information. It was an incredibly sophisticated system hidden in plain sight. The investigation's scope widened with each revelation. The FBI's lead investigator testified about the network's reach. "We've identified 13 judges who were actively participating in selecting vulnerable youth for trafficking, 9 facility wardens who facilitated transfers and covered up disappearances, 6 federal agents who helped falsify documents and misdirect investigations." He displayed a map showing how the network spread across multiple states. Red dots marked courthouses where corrupt judges presided. Blue squares indicated detention facilities involved in trafficking. Yellow lines traced the routes used to transport victims. "Many of these officials have already been arrested," the investigator continued. "Others resigned when the investigation became public. Some have fled the country. We're working with international law enforcement to locate them." Throughout the hearings, Harold Whitmore sat in a prisoner's jumpsuit, his face impassive. He refused to speak, invoking his Fifth Amendment rights. His expensive legal team had been reduced to a single public defender after his assets were frozen. On the final day, the prosecution played their strongest evidence: hours of recorded conversations between Whitmore and other conspirators. His voice filled the courtroom, casual and cold as he discussed merchandise and packages. "The darker ones fetch more overseas," his voice crackled through the speakers. "Especially if they're young. Make sure you check their teeth, though. Buyers are picky about that." Laughter followed his words. The jury members' faces hardened as they listened. Some took notes. Others simply stared at Whitmore, who kept his eyes fixed on the table before him. More recordings followed. Whitmore haggling over prices. Whitmore suggesting ways to falsify charges against specific girls. Whitmore joking about parents who couldn't afford lawyers to challenge his rulings. When the final tape ended, silence filled the courtroom. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They filed back in, their verdict unanimous: guilty on all counts. The judge, a woman with steel gray hair and fierce eyes, read the sentence: "Harold Whitmore, for your crimes against humanity, for the systematic abuse of power, for the trafficking and exploitation of children entrusted to your care, this court sentences you to 4 consecutive life terms." She paused, looking directly at him. "You will serve these terms without possibility of parole. You will receive no special protection in federal custody. Your judicial pension is hereby revoked, and all assets seized for victim restitution." Whitmore finally showed emotion then. His face reddened and he began to sputter protests. But the judge continued over his objections. "Furthermore, your name will be struck from all judicial records except those pertaining to your crimes. The courthouse where you presided will be renamed as a memorial to your victims. You will die in prison, remembered only as a cautionary tale of power corrupted and justice perverted." As marshals led him away, survivors in the gallery stood silently. They watched the man who had stolen their childhoods shuffle out in chains, his power finally stripped away, his legacy now nothing but a warning etched in criminal history. Weeks after the hearings, Amara and Nia Carter returned home to Atlanta under heavy FBI protection. 2 black SUVs escorted their vehicle, and agents swept the modest suburban house before allowing them inside. Their father, Marcus Carter, stood in the doorway, his normally composed English teacher demeanor crumbling at the sight of his daughters. "My babies," he whispered, tears streaming down his face as he pulled them both into a crushing embrace. His body shook with silent sobs as he held them, the weight of what they'd endured, what he hadn't known about, pressing down on his shoulders. The twins melted into their father's arms, allowing themselves to feel truly safe for the first time in months. The smell of his cologne, the familiar softness of his sweater, the gentle way he stroked their hair, it all felt like coming up for air after being underwater for too long. Rosa Bennett moved in with them for the first week, taking over the guest room downstairs. She filled the house with the aroma of home-cooked meals, rich stews, fresh-baked bread, and comfort foods that seemed to warm more than just their bodies. She moved through their space like a protective shadow, always present but never intrusive. During quiet moments in the kitchen, Rosa would sit with them, sharing comfortable silence over steaming mugs of tea. She never pushed for details about Denton Ridge, never asked them to relive the horrors they'd witnessed. Instead, she listened when they chose to speak, offering gentle squeezes of their hands or understanding nods. "You girls did something incredible," she said one evening, stirring a pot of chicken soup. "But now it's time to heal, however long that takes." The media circus raged outside their bubble of recovery. Reporters camped at the end of their street, hoping to catch the teenage heroes who had exposed the trafficking ring. Networks offered exclusive interviews. Magazine writers sent elaborate gift baskets with interview requests tucked inside. Amara and Nia declined them all. They had no interest in becoming public figures or having their trauma packaged for prime time. Their story belonged to them, and to the girls still fighting their way through the system. Instead, they channeled their energy into something new. Late at night, huddled over Amara's laptop, they began building a website. They called it Quiet Queens, a legal defense fund and trauma recovery program specifically designed for Black girls caught in the juvenile justice system. "We need to focus on the girls no one sees," Nia said as they worked on the mission statement. "The ones who don't have FBI handlers or training, the ones who are truly alone." The website started small, just a few pages explaining their mission, resources for families navigating the legal system, and a donation portal. But something about it resonated. Within weeks, lawyers began reaching out, offering pro bono services. Trauma counselors volunteered their time. Former inmates shared their stories. Their father helped them register as a proper nonprofit organization, working through the paperwork late into the night. Rosa connected them with trusted contacts in law enforcement and social services. Slowly but surely, Quiet Queens grew from an idea into a movement. 3 months after launching the website, they held their first in-person class. 3 girls recently released from a juvenile facility in Mississippi sat nervously around a table in a community center conference room. Each had a new chess set in front of them, donated by a local game shop that had heard about their program. "Chess isn't just about winning," Amara explained, her voice gentle as she demonstrated basic moves. "It's about seeing all your options, about thinking several steps ahead." One of the girls, barely 14 with fierce eyes and tightly braided hair, played aggressively. She attacked without hesitation, sacrificing pieces for quick advantages. Amara recognized the strategy. It was how she used to play before learning patience. During their match, Amara deliberately left openings. She watched the girl's face light up as she spotted them, saw the pride in her eyes as she captured piece after piece. When checkmate came, the girl's victory smile was genuine. "You're really good," Amara told her, meaning it. "Want to learn some defensive moves next?" The chess classes became a weekly fixture. More girls joined, some bringing siblings or friends. They learned openings and endgames, but also shared stories, fears, and dreams. The conference room became a sanctuary where they could just be teenagers again, not case numbers or statistics. One morning, about 6 months after starting Quiet Queens, Nia checked their P.O. box and found a heavy package wrapped in brown paper. No return address, just her name written in familiar handwriting. She brought it home and the twins opened it together on their bedroom floor. Inside was a wooden chessboard, hand-carved with intricate details. The squares weren't simply black and white. Each one told a story through tiny symbols etched into the wood. Prison bars transformed into broken chains. Closed doors became open windows. Dark corners held hidden stars. A small note fell from the wrapping. Still playing. Still fighting. T. The twins smiled at each other, running their fingers over the carved surface. They recognized Tash's work, the same careful attention to detail she'd shown in her prison documentation, but now transformed into something beautiful and free. They placed the board on their desk between their tournament trophies and family photos. It wasn't just a game board, it was a reminder. They were no longer pawns in someone else's corrupt game. They had become queens, and they were building something new, a system where every piece had value, where the rules protected instead of imprisoned, where girls like them could find their own path to victory. 2 months after launching Quiet Queens, Amara and Nia Carter received an unusual invitation. A senior Department of Justice official requested their presence at a private roundtable discussion in Washington, D.C. The terms were specific: no recordings, no press, completely off the record. It was to be a closed-door strategy session on juvenile justice reform. Rosa Bennett drove them to the DOJ building herself, her presence both protective and grounding. The twins wore simple business attire, pressed slacks and button-down shirts that made them look older than their 16 years. Their father had helped them pick out the outfits, proud but worried as he straightened their collars before they left. The conference room was windowless and secure, dominated by a long mahogany table. 8 senior officials sat waiting, all in expensive suits, all carrying thick folders of notes. Their faces showed a mix of curiosity and discomfort at being faced with 2 teenage girls who had exposed such massive corruption within their system. "We appreciate you coming," the lead official began, his tone carefully measured. "Your experience has highlighted critical failures in our juvenile justice protocols. We'd like your input on potential reforms." Amara and Nia exchanged a quick glance. They had discussed this moment extensively, prepared their approach. Nia spoke first, her voice clear and steady. "Before we start, we have conditions," she said. "No names used from our case, no personal interviews, no press releases about this meeting. We're not here to be your poster children or success story. We're here for action." The officials shifted in their seats but nodded agreement. Rosa, seated slightly behind the twins, allowed herself a small smile of approval. Over the next 3 hours, the Carter sisters methodically outlined their proposed framework for reform. They had spent weeks researching, consulting with lawyers, and incorporating feedback from other survivors through their Quiet Queens network. First, Amara began, opening her laptop to display a detailed presentation. Mandatory legal guardians for all juveniles in the system, not public defenders, specifically trained child advocates who stay with cases from arrest through sentencing and beyond. She clicked through slides showing statistics on juvenile cases where children faced judges alone, where overworked public defenders met their clients minutes before hearings. Second, Nia continued, cameras in every juvenile courtroom, full audio and video recording of all proceedings, with secure copies maintained by an independent oversight body. No more closed-door sentencing. The officials took notes rapidly as the twins moved through their points. They detailed the need for regular third-party audits of private detention facilities, with unannounced inspections and full access to all areas. They proposed a federal oversight committee specifically for youth sentencing decisions, with diverse representation and veto power over excessive terms. "The private prison industry will fight this," one official warned, tapping his pen against his notepad. "They have powerful lobbyists." "So do we," Nia replied calmly. "Every survivor's story is ammunition. Every leaked video is a weapon. We're not afraid of their money anymore." A younger official near the end of the table cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could start with something more symbolic? A task force? Or a public awareness campaign?" Amara's head snapped up, her eyes sharp but her voice controlled. "Symbolism didn't save us," she said. "Systems did this. Systems trafficked girls. Systems silenced witnesses. Systems protected predators. Systems need fixing, not symbols." The room fell silent. Rosa watched proudly as her protégés commanded the space, no longer the scared girls she'd first trained, but powerful advocates who understood both strategy and survival. While the twins continued their presentation, Rosa slipped out for a scheduled meeting of her own. In a quiet corner of the DOJ cafeteria, she found two young black federal attorneys, recent hires who had reached out through secure channels after the Denton Ridge exposure. "This is everything from Project Eclipse," Rosa said quietly, sliding them an encrypted drive. "Training protocols, communication systems, infiltration strategies. The next generation's got to take this further than we did." The attorneys nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of what they were being entrusted with. They had seen the corruption from inside the system. Now they had tools to fight it. Later that night, back home in Atlanta, Amara and Nia sat on their familiar rooftop perch. The city sprawled before them, a maze of lights and shadows. They had spent countless evenings here before Denton Ridge, planning chess tournaments and normal teenage dreams. Now they planned revolutions. The air was cool, carrying the scent of approaching autumn. Nia hugged her knees to her chest, looking thoughtful. "You ever wish it hadn't happened?" she asked softly. Amara was quiet for a moment, watching a plane cross the distant sky. "No," she finally answered. "I just wish no one else has to do it again." They sat in comfortable silence, sisters and survivors, warriors and witnesses. Below them, their father's porch light cast a gentle glow. After a while, they climbed back inside through their bedroom window. The porch light flickered off, leaving only starlight above the quiet house. 1 year after the DOJ meeting, a new building stood proud in the heart of Baltimore. The quiet Queens Initiative Community Center occupied what was once an abandoned warehouse, now transformed into a beacon of hope and healing. The renovated space featured clean lines, warm colors, and large windows that let in streams of natural light. Inside, the center hummed with purposeful activity. The ground floor housed legal consultation rooms where pro bono attorneys met with families, helping them navigate the complexities of juvenile justice. Therapy offices lined one wing, staffed by trauma-informed counselors who specialized in working with system-impacted youth. A computer lab offered resources for education and advocacy work. But the heart of the center was the chess room. It occupied the largest space, with soaring ceilings decorated with hand-painted murals. The artwork depicted black girls as powerful chess pieces, queens standing tall with crowns held high, knights riding proud on gleaming steeds, bishops wielding books instead of crosses. Each piece bore the face of a survivor, their stories woven into the fabric of the game itself. Wooden tables filled the room, each with an inlaid chessboard and carefully maintained pieces. Natural light poured through skylights, creating a peaceful atmosphere that felt worlds away from the institutional fluorescence of detention centers. On the main wall hung a simple photograph that captured the essence of the initiative. It showed Amara and Nia Carter in casual hoodies, their heads together, genuine smiles lighting up their faces. Between them, they held up a broken chess piece like a victory trophy, the same bishop that had once served as a warning in Denton Ridge, now transformed into a symbol of triumph. As afternoon classes let out, kids began streaming into the center. Volunteers in purple shirts, the initiative's color, greeted them by name, directing some to homework help, others to counseling sessions, and many to the chess room. The space filled with the quiet click of pieces and occasional bursts of excited chatter. Among the new arrivals was a girl named Serenity. At 13, she carried herself with the wariness of someone who had learned to be invisible. Her backpack was clutched tight against her chest like armor as she hesitated in the chess room doorway, taking in the scene with careful eyes. The other kids seemed to know where they belonged, pairing up at tables or gathering in small groups. Serenity drifted to an empty table in the corner, sitting alone but watching everything. Her fingers traced the edge of the chessboard, but she didn't reach for any pieces. Nia Carter entered the room quietly, noting the new face immediately. She had developed a sixth sense for spotting kids who needed gentle approach. Making her way across the room, she grabbed a chair and settled next to Serenity's table, giving the girl plenty of space. "You play?" Nia asked softly, her voice warm but not pushing. Serenity glanced up, then back down at the board. "A little," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Nia began setting up the pieces with practiced ease, each one making a soft tap against the wood. "You go first," she offered, turning the white pieces toward Serenity. Across town, in a federal building's conference room, Rosa Bennett stood before a gathering of juvenile justice officials and reform advocates. The walls were lined with statistics and case studies, but Rosa held up a simple notebook. "Before we discuss policy," she said, her voice carrying the weight of experience, "I want you to hear their words. Not their case numbers, not their statistics, their truth." She opened the notebook and began reading anonymous quotes from survivors. Each one echoed through the quiet room. "They tried to make us forget our names. I stopped looking in mirrors because I couldn't recognize myself anymore. Every time they called me inmate, I whispered my real name in the dark." Rosa paused, then read the final quote. Tash's words, powerful in their simplicity. "Don't just free us. Give us our names back." The sun began to set over Baltimore, casting long shadows through the Quiet Queens Initiative's windows. But inside, the chess room remained alive with energy. Girls of various ages clustered around boards, some playing intense matches, others learning basic moves from patient mentors. In one corner, a heated debate about juvenile sentencing reform broke out between two teenagers, their chess game temporarily forgotten as they passionately discussed justice. Near the murals, a group of younger girls practiced chess notation while sharing stories about their weeks. The space had become exactly what the Carter twins envisioned, not just a refuge, but a launching pad, not just a healing space, but a training ground for future advocates and leaders. Outside the building, mounted beside the entrance, a bronze plaque caught the last rays of sunlight. Its message, simple but profound, summed up everything the initiative stood for. This was never about checkmate. It was about flipping the board. The Carter twins. The words gleamed in the fading light, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful moves in the game of justice aren't about winning, they're about changing how the game is played. If you enjoyed the story of Amara and Nia, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it. They're about changing how the game is played. If you enjoyed the story of Amara and Nia, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.